Welcome to the Coast Podcast. I'm Emilie, a virtual assistant agency owner who left Amazon in 2019 to build my dream.
And I'm Whitney, a freelance writer and communications consultant who never felt at home in a cube farm.
We didn't see many people paving their own ways like we decided to, so we created this podcast to talk to others who were brave enough to pick a different path. Creatives, entrepreneurs, people doing their careers and their lives their way.
Join us as we learn from them, get inspired, and show you beautiful paths less traveled.
Not every road leads to the coast, but the ones that do come with a great view.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the coast. This is my first time flying solo because Emilie had my son. We'll use a nice term. My son would say she's on a mission because my son is very into superheroes. So Emilie is on a mission to give her husband his ID at the airport so that he is allowed to board his plane. And, you know, Billy, if you're listening, I find this to be, I hate to generalize, but I find this to be a very common male problem. And I'll just leave it there. So props to Emilie for saving her husband and his, what I assume to be a business trip. But I do feel confident that I can steer the ship without Emilie, as much as I'm going to miss her, and bring you part two, our first person that has returned so quickly to the podcast. I don't have any insight into the numbers, and even if I did, I don't really care. But based on the amount of DMs I've received, Sam, you are a very popular guest. We have Sam with Human Aligned, our human design expert, to tell us today about energy centers. And this is going to be a great conversation, not only because, as you know, I'm obsessed with human design, but that I am double caffeinated. I actually just went out to coffee with what you'll hear as last week's guest, Michelle from Minty Maid. She and I might be working on a project together. So I changed up my Thursday morning and met her at a coffee shop to talk about plans for that. And I usually don't have two coffees in the morning, but I was like, actually, this is going to be perfect for my conversation with Sam. Just bring like extra energy, even though I know you're probably anti-coffee, but you support me. And really quickly, I'm Whitney Popa, and I own a communications consultancy in Edmonds, Washington. This is the coast where we talk to mostly female entrepreneurs about their lives, their journeys, all the cool shit they're doing. And I can say that because we already have an explicit warning. So welcome to part two with Sam from Human Aligned. Welcome back, Sam.
Thank you. Good morning. I actually have coffee also as a projector. It's not necessarily a great thing, but I've just kind of toned it down over the years. So yeah, I still take my hits.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Oh yeah. You were the one that was like, just put it straight in my veins, right?
Yes. I took December off, but now with January, we're back at it. I think it was the gray that I really needed kind of an extra boost in the mornings.
Yeah. My husband, the projector, was trying to say like, you know, he was going to be off the sauce a little bit, try to be, but he gets so tired in the afternoon, you know, you guys need your naps, that he fires up the machine in the afternoon again. And so I think he just needs to figure out how to add some more self-care into his routine and decide what that looks like for him.
You know, a thing for him might be to just kind of take a step back. And even if he just gets out of everybody else's energy, it can help him kind of disassociate. They joke, but it's kind of serious. Like an 11-minute nap changes lives. So if he can just take 11 minutes, and also projectors, they restore themselves by being horizontal, which take that however you want to take it. But literally, like, throw your feet up, laptop on your stomach if you're working on the couch. No joke, once you're horizontal, something with the energy flow, and it's just a recovery position.
Well, two things on that. You know exactly how he's going to take that comment. And
you're welcome.
number two, I have a friend from college. She keeps popping into my mind from various conversations we're having. And she has said so many times, and we would just laugh. Like, she was like, I really just want to be horizontal right now. So she must be a projector. And she's not talking about what he would be talking about.
Right. No, I'm super curious. You're going to have to ask her for her info and we'll pull her chart.
Yeah. I don't know how into it she'd be, but I don't think she'd be against it by any means. So today you wanted to talk about energy centers. So wherever you want to start with that, just go right for it.
Okay. So I have your chart in front of me also, and I have your husband's, because I know he's listening.
Yeah, I'm trying to mute him out as he's in a call in the background because I kick him out of the office every time. I'm like, I need the office to talk to Sam, but I'm sure that you can probably hear some male voice tones in the background.
At least we know you're not being like broken into or something.
True. And he loves these episodes, so he's going to be really into it.
Perfect. Who doesn't love human design? So basically with the energy centers, human design is obviously at the synthesis of a bunch of ancient practices and modern science. And with the chakras being involved, there are 7 chakras. Well, through human design, once we evolved to the next level and we actually got to have things in our world that were beyond just staying alive, they decided that we had evolved. And so we got 2 extra centers. So now we have 9 centers instead of the typical 7 that goes with the chakras. When you look at the 9 centers on your chart, if they are defined, which means colored in, and the color does not matter. If they're colored in, they're defined, and you're much more consistent in those areas and less absorbing of outside sources. And then where you see them, if they're white, that means that they are open and you're more susceptible to outside influence and amplifying other people or energies around you. So when you look at your chart, you're either defined or undefined, and that dictates what your type is, what your authority is, what your strategy should be. All those things basically come from whether they're colored in, or whether they're white.
I'm trying to dig for mine right now. I know I have an open mind, and I just found my daughter's, and she has an open mind as well.
That's going to be fun when she's a teenager.
Yeah.
So with your chart, like I like to start at the bottom. So we go down to the root, which is the root center is motor and pressure. It's a pressure center. It is literal. It governs the adrenal glands. Figurative, it's a relationship to getting things in motion. So if you have a defined root, which is, sorry, let me explain again, the square at the very lowest part of your body graph, that is your root, and it's the one associated with adrenals. And so if it's defined, it simply means you have a fixed way of processing adrenaline. You're really great with deadlines. You're just very, very consistent with dealing with pressure. When it's open, you're defined. Yes, you're defined. Yeah. And so you're really good with dealing with pressure. You don't take on everybody's outside pressure. It's more internal. And then with it being open or undefined, it means you do not have consistent access to this energy, and you can actually take on the stress of your environment more so.
And that's my husband.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's great. I like it. A lot of those people are more drawn to adrenaline junkie type experiences, or like crave people or stimulants like caffeine, chocolate, things like that. So they're both sides. If you're not acting in your right energy, this is where you get prone to burnout, because you will literally burn out your adrenals. There are a lot of projectors that have a defined root that are very prone to burnout if they don't kind of operate in the correct way. So when you have it open, you take on other people's energy and you amplify it. So you can utilize that, but also you just have to be very aware of, like, if you're undefined, you can feel extremely overwhelmed by pressure and deadlines. And so you're meant to selectively kind of ride the wave of external pressure. So if your husband was like utilizing you to get things done, then that's where he would need like the midday nap, where he takes his time to get away and kind of just disconnect from your power in that place, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Good. So if we move along to the solar plexus, which is on, if you're looking at your chart, I call it the far right, kind of towards the bottom, triangle facing in, that is going to be your solar plexus, also known as your emotional center. This is an awareness and a motor center. This governs literal, it's kidney, pancreas, bladder. Figuratively, it's your emotions. So if it's defined, which yours is, you have your own set of emotional wave. Like your emotions are your emotions. You can be sad for no reason. You can be happy for no reason. They just very much come in waves. Do you feel like that's accurate for you?
Yes, especially when I'm on my period.
Fair, definitely. And human design actually tracks very much along with cycles, lunar cycles, and just cycles in general. So that's not surprising at all. And it's when it's defined, depending which channels actually define your solar plexus, it will change how your emotional waves come and go. Like some people, it can be extreme highs and lows. Other people, it's more like an escalator. And then when you hit the top, you just kind of fall off and hit bottom. So there are different types of waves. So when you look at your chart, it's actually a good idea to kind of pull which ones you are. And towards the center, going out changes. So when you look at your gates and your channels and see which ones are defined, it can actually be super helpful to know when to ride or what type of emotional wave you have. For you, you're an emotional manifesting generator. So for you, you're with your emotional authority, you actually need to give yourself about 24 hours, and you don't want to make decisions in the high or in the low because you are defined.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we move over to your husband, who is undefined emotionally, he basically, for him, he has the ability to pick up what everyone else is doing or what you're doing and amplify that. So he takes on everybody else's emotions.
Yes.
Which is kind of entertaining because you're considered an emotional. He's considered a non-emotional. But non-emotionals, where they're undefined, they're typically more emotional because they're picking up on it more so and amplifying it back. They're kind of like mirrors.
Yep. He's quick to emotion, especially based on us and especially with the kids too. So like good and bad. He'll be like, oh, we're having a dance party and like we're getting down, or they're screaming at each other, then we're all screaming at each other.
For sure. He can amplify things that are not his. So he'll take on emotions. And that's why it's really great for people that are undefined. When they start to get really emotional about something, it's good for them to kind of say like, okay, wait, I need to take a minute and figure out, is this mine or is this not mine?
Yep.
And so if your kid walks in and they're a level 2, like angry, and he's like, oh my God, they're a level 8 angry, and he sees it, but everybody else doesn't really see it. And that person might not even know they're angry, right? Your kid might not even register that they're upset if they have a defined emotion. And so, or a defined solar plexus. So for him, he's kind of just mirroring them, but amplifying it outward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they tell people a lot of times with whether they're defined or not defined, they kind of tell people that, they want to run up into like the mountains and hide because a lot of people's emotions are super overwhelming. But if you don't mirror it back to them, a lot of times they don't even know they're having them. So your job is kind of to show them what they're feeling in a random way.
Yeah. That's like what I love so much about human design is just how validating it is to everyone in this way that I've never been able to describe. Like even I have everybody else's charts pulled up, but I can't for the life of me find mine, of course. And so even you just saying it, I'm like, yep, that's me, or nope, that's not, just based on like what I know about myself in open or closed. I could probably predict what each of them are.
Yeah. And what I love is that either way, whether it's defined or undefined, it's still a great thing. Like it's just you tap into other people's energies, or you have your own that's your gift. Either way, it's a fantastic thing. So there are there are things to be aware of, but there's really nothing there's no losing in human design. You're just learning. Everybody's learning.
And it's just using it to your advantage and giving yourself, as my mom would say, giving yourself grace in certain ways, or just understanding, oh, this is how I operate and what do I do now that I have this information. It's really freeing to be able, like, for him to know, okay, these people, I'm going to take this on, and then like I'm going to give myself a beat after I'm with them to be like, sift through what's his and what's theirs. And I think what people realize too, once they start getting into it, is they've been having these conversations in different ways. And now it just brings so much like language to it, because we would walk out of situations before where I would follow up with him, like at an event or something, and he would be all like amped up or whatever. And I would be like, okay, what part of that is yours? And what are you bringing from that? And we didn't know anything about human design years ago, but I could tell like, oh, your mom was all spun up about this and now you're spun up about it. But like, you don't need to take that on for her, sort of thing.
For sure. Definitely. And yeah, like that's exactly, it's dictated in his chart, which kind of cracks me up. Like, I love it when people say that. They're like, oh my God, this clicks or this clicks or light bulb came on. It's so great for communication.
Yeah. And as his wife, it allows me to support him and understand him and his experience better. So I'm not taking things personally or, you know, harping on him about something when I understand that's how he is. And it helps me navigate our relationship and conversations better without being like, you know, I'm just frustrated that he's this way and I'm that way and I don't understand it. But it's just like, this is who he is. And we both need to work together on it. Same with my kids. Like, it's so helpful.
I wish it would have been around, 30 something years ago when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It's just so helpful because you can see how you can talk to them in a way that's so productive and give them the opportunity to express themselves in a way that's natural to them. And everybody can get so much farther, so much easier when you have the tools to get there. And I think this is a fantastic tool to use for that. If we move over to the sacral center, which this is a very, very defining center. So this would be second to the bottom, center, square. If it's colored in, it's defined. If it's not, obviously undefined. It is a motor center, but it governs literally sexual organs, figuratively, creativity, and desire. This is strictly for, if this is what deems you either generator or a manifesting generator, is you have to have your sacral defined. This is just like pure energy, pure creation. This is what makes you guys just emote energy, essentially. And so when you're defined, when your desire is peaked, you create energy. And that's why they say that if a generator or a manifesting generator is working on something that lights them up, they will just be able to go, go, go. Like their energy is just non-ending. Like they just have this central source that just kind of keeps building. If it is undefined, you are tapped in and can taste the desire and energy creation of others, but you don't have it so much on your own. And so a lot of people, especially projectors, because I'm a projector, don't have this defined. If we're around a lot of people with sacral energy, we're trying to be the do people, and we just don't have it. And so if we try to keep up, we're prone to burnout. And if we can't do the rise and grind, then a lot of times people get down on themselves because they're like, okay, I'm lazy. I'm not doing what everybody else is capable of. And it's like, no, you're just meant to do it in a different way. It's not that there's anything wrong with it. And so the positive for being a generator or manifesting generator is you just have this power. The positive of not having it defined, being a manifestor, reflector, or projector, is that as a projector, you can go somewhere else and harness the power of other people. And a lot of times, especially with kind of the lockdowns and things like that, people are finding that they don't have energy working from home, and they think that it's a lack of willpower, and it's not. They just don't they're just not tapped into the energy source. So I tell people, get out, like get out of your home, go to a coffee shop and sit outside. Go to a park and sit outside, go to a restaurant, go to a bar if that's your scene, go wherever, a bookstore and sit. And then just being in the presence of other people, somebody there has a defined sacral that you can steal energy from, essentially.
I think that's a huge, super important point for people right now, especially with how much they're beating themselves up about working from home. And like for Workhorse, we have so many people who are probably not super well versed on human design, but what they come in and say to me, which has been so fascinating, is I'm an extrovert and I'm sitting alone in my apartment. I can't do this anymore. And it's probably that they have that undefined center more so than the extroversion.
For sure. A lot of times it is. And they gain a lot of people feel like they're withdrawing big time. And typically those people have a lot of open centers, and it's just they're not getting the energy from the outside sources that they typically do to thrive on. So they just think like, okay, like if you've ever like felt like you're sitting at home and you're just like a dud, it's like, well, maybe you just need some energy. I was joking about how I need to go to the pet store and just find a fish that I believe has like a really strong sacral so that I can get at it. Because a fish, when it comes to animals, it's not as big of a commitment as something else. But I'm like, I should just go and just really feel into these bowls and see if I can find one that's like really, really giving me life. Yeah. And it's otherwise I will go to Workhorse or I'll go to a cafe or somewhere. I can get more done in an hour or two outside of my home than I can in 3 hours when I'm here.
I think what Roz is going to hear from this specifically, because he's an open projector, whereas I just pulled up my chart again to look at it. I'm completely defined in every single place except in my head and like mouth or whatever. Yeah. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of definition there, which is fascinating in its own way. But he and I have had to work after bedtime, our kids' bedtime lately. And he has said, like, I love it when you're here. I think he gets more done. Whereas when he's like alone and on his calls, he's just like not as motivated because he doesn't have like the energy and the drive coming externally, which is so fascinating.
That's for sure. And a funny thing with that is that like with manifesting generators and generators versus like projectors, you wake up in the morning with like, because you have this sacral, you have a crap ton of energy right from the start. You need to expend that. Like you need to spend it. And then you go to bed when you're tired.
Yeah.
Projectors and people that don't have this defined typically need to go to bed before they're actually tired so they can disconnect and kind of wind down. But instead he's like riding your high and he's just going for it, which is a great thing for work. But that's just when he wants to really make sure that he's doing that self-care and taking time to rest. Like he just needs rest in between, or like right now you kicked him out. So technically he's out of your aura. Like now is the time that he can kind of recharge when he's on his own. That's why like projectors tend to have like more solo time. And it's just like, they just withdraw for a little bit and then they come back in and they're just like re-energized because they've regained like their peace and they've disconnected from the energy that's pushing them so hard.
I think what would be a cool supplement or complement to this human design work too is like, okay, I'm a projector. A lot of my projector friends are pretty in my wellness. We love the woo. So they understand how to take care of themselves. But like, I think a lot of projectors like him need an ebook of like, what is self-care for me?
Yeah. 100%. Yes, that would be very great. Like I will start working on that actually, because I think it's something that people need to know. And when they look at human design, it's so terrifying. And then for a lot of people, it's overwhelming. But once you start to find it out, and even if you just stick to like the simple things, it's like, holy hell, like it's so many ways to hack your life in such a simple way where you can be so much more productive. And it's so helpful.
Yeah.
It's so helpful. And that's just with the, so the entire bottom of your chart is completely defined. And your husband has 2 defined centers, which I love seeing charts that have people with a lot of openness And I also love seeing people that have like the powerhouse. Like it makes so much sense because you guys kind of, when you overlap your charts, you guys fill in a lot of spaces for each other. Like if you notice that also when you have like family members charts, you start to pull them, or relationships, friends, you start to lay over the charts and you could really see who complements each other in the best way.
Mm-hmm.
Because you fill in the gaps and you're typically drawn to those people that have different channels than you do to fill in the spots. So you just kind of come together and your systems work.
Yeah. That's so cool for teamwork too. I know I mentioned this on our first episode, but all those Myers-Briggs and Enneagram and things that people do at work, you're a color, you're a dove, whatever. I mean, I'll do all of them, but the only one that's really resonated with me at this level is this. And if everybody, I think there's benefits to some of them, like leadership types or whatever, but I think this is so much more powerful in how do I work with this person and using their energy or not. And I find it to be just mind blowing, honestly.
Yeah, I've sneakily pulled charts on certain people that I have worked with because I know how to better, even if they don't believe anything of human design, even if they don't give two shits about it, I know how to better communicate with them and I know how to better hype them up or something that they're going to respond to and something they'll thrive doing. Exactly. Whereas like, okay, that person's not meant to do task A, but they'll kill task C, no problem. We're just wasting our time spinning our wheels. So as far as productivity goes, like you can really streamline a lot of things by understanding who does the best. And I mean, you can use this at home with your kids. Like it might not be that your kid doesn't want to do chores. They just might hate the ones that you're giving them versus putting them somewhere where they don't mind it or they work well doing certain things. So you can biohack this at home too. And all of a sudden you've got a great vacuumer, somebody's doing the dishes, you can just outsource. Like once they're tall enough to reach things, yeah, you're good.
Oh yeah. Our daughter, she's a generator and she loves, if we give her a wipe, I'm going to shout out Levant because they are plant-based and amazing. And they have these no chemical plant-based disinfecting wipes. And they came out of the fact that like when they were pregnant, one of the owners was reading on the back of like the Lysol wipes, like basically don't let your kid crawl in this or your dog walk on it because they can absorb the chemicals through their paw pads. And she was like, if a dog can't even walk on this, then like I'm not going to have my baby like licking the floor afterwards because they do. So part of their motivation in like creating this brand was her reading that and being like, wow, like a dog isn't even supposed to walk on these wipes. So now you know how kids are. They just are everywhere with everything. And even when she was in her high chair, I would give her a wipe to wipe down her own tray. And she's like an obsessively neurotic little cleaner. So she'll take her wipes now and just wipe down the whole table. If I gave her that assignment to wipe things, with being confident that even if she licked the wipe afterwards, she would not die. That is a perfect job for her, especially given how much energy she has. She is just like our Jack Russell Terrier growing up that we always joked, like she goes until she doesn't. It's like 110 million% or zero.
Which is really great because that means that she's doing all the things that make her happy. She's running. And then when she exhausts all energy, that's when it's like, okay, recharge. It's like equivalent to having a battery and then the battery dies while you're sleeping. It's plugged in. You wake up in the morning, fresh battery.
Yeah.
Which is, I think it's so cool, which is just like a great thing that generators and manifesting generators have. It's just amazing. So when something lights them up, they keep going. So just set her on the baseboards and let her just like cruise all the way around the house.
Yeah, seriously. I should do that. I hadn't even thought of the baseboards.
I was just looking at mine this morning. That's why that came up. Send her to my house when she's done. So the next center, I call it far left. So bottom left, inward facing triangle, that is your spleen. This is an awareness center. It is the kind of the oldest awareness center because literally it's immunity, your lymphatic system, figuratively it's fears and instincts. The spleen is meant to keep you alive. So that is where typical fears live. And I will say that most people with a defined spleen you have a defined spleen.
Yeah.
You will sense danger. Like you're very aware of your surroundings. And, you know, if you're a deer in the meadow and a hunter has a sight on you, you're going to feel it. You're going to say like, okay, like ears up, what's going on? There's a reason to be afraid. A lot of people with undefined splenic centers or spleens will walk down a dark alley. And unless somebody else tells them they should be afraid, it's just like, I'm off on an adventure, like no big deal, like off into the world.
Mm-hmm.
So the great thing about being splenic is that you have this kind of, it's a knowing, it's like an intuitive hit. And it just kind of speaks to you once, like it's not going to sit there and ruminate. Once it hits, anything that ruminates after that is typically your mind, but your spleen's going to kind of tell you which way to go left, don't go right, get on the freeway versus taking the back roads. Like start to pay attention. If you really want to listen into it and you have a defined spleen, just start writing things down, especially when you have the little hits. Like if something tells you to go one way versus another, to go to a certain store first, to not get on the plane, to do this, to do that, just start writing them down and like listening to your intuition. And the more that you listen to it, even on the little blips, the louder it's going to get and the more true it's going to feel. And then with the undefined, you can easily pick up on the fears and anxiety of others and then amplify them.
Yes. I'm looking at his and looking at mine. I'm
yes.
Like, he's open. I'm closed. I'm like, I have a feeling about this. We should not. And then sometimes he questions me, but he's like come to understand like Whitney's always right. So she doesn't have to be able to explain it. I don't like people who need evidence. Like this is evidence. I have a defined spleen. You do not. You listen to me.
So that's actually a really good point about all of everybody's charts in general, is that as far as sacral goes and splenic goes, you don't need to know why. It's not like, oh, okay, well, let me explain this. Like if you start to look for reasoning in it, you're using your mind, you're not using your spleen, and you're not using your gut. A lot of people say like gut punch, like you'll get a gut punch in the no and that's sacral typically is like when your gut tells you yes or no, like that's your or like that's what you're going to feel. Spleen, a lot of people will say that it's like a quiet knowing. And I'm a splenic projector, so I don't have a sacral. I swear to God, sometimes my spleen punches me in the freaking face. Like it is not a quiet knowing. It's like a bitch slap. Like it is legit. Sometimes it gets down and dirty. Like it is like, okay, you need to listen to me right now. And it's actually saved me quite a few times. Like, so as far as him listening to you, you're the deer that's aware and you're just kind of getting him out of the sight of the hunter, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one that you can really start to kind of, you can build your intuition in that. And it's not, if you're undefined, it doesn't mean you lack intuition. That's kind of a fluke that some people have kind of got panicky when they see it. They're like, oh, well, I'm not intuitive. And it's like, that's not true. It's not true. You could still be very intuitive and have an undefined spleen. So don't take it as like a hindrance. And then from there, I find this very interesting. So when we go to, when we get up to your ego and your heart center, both of you are defined. And only 30% of people are typically defined when it comes to your heart center, your ego. It's a motor center. Literally, it's connected to your stomach, gallbladder, thymus gland. Figuratively, it is willpower and motivation. So you guys both have consistent willpower and motivation. And a lot of times, you can be around people that have an undefined ego center, and you can get them on the bandwagon to do a lot of things that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of times after they get away from you for a bit, they're like, what the fuck? I don't want to go skydiving. Why did I tell Whitney I was going to go skydiving next week? Like, I really don't want to go skydiving. And so for people with this defined, it's really, really kind of cool because you can get people hyped up to do things with you in the moment. And especially if they're already yes people, you can be like, I want to go on a ferry ride. Do you want to go on a ferry ride? And somebody will be like, yeah, I do. And then halfway through, they're like, what? Like maybe they go to the bathroom alone. They're like, how the fuck did I get on this ferry? Like, what happened here? But it's like, you give them the motivation and like the willpower to do it. And so that part's really, really exciting. So both of you have that defined.
So what you're saying is we can't let them go away. We have to hold them and be like, okay, you committed and we're doing it now. Like, not give them an out. That's what I'm hearing.
A little bit. So and like a projector will agree to plans 6 months in advance. A manifesting generator, you will agree to something maybe a month in advance, but you'll get closer and you're like, I don't know why I said I wanted to go to that movie. And so you are kind of like a little bit of a conundrum that's kind of fun, but you can get people to do things in the moment. So you're kind of that person too, where other people want to get you to do it right now because you are a manifesting generator and you might change your mind.
Yeah.
Which that's another thing to bring up is that as a manifesting generator, if you do change your mind. Like it's, as long as you're not doing something, malicious or hateful. If you change your mind on going to a brunch because you know that you don't want to go to the brunch, don't show up with the negative half-ass energy that you didn't want to go to the brunch. Reschedule, let them know you'd rather do something else. Do it in a polite way, make it up to them somehow, exchange energy in a different way. But if you don't want to do something when it comes time to do it, change your mind and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people need to hear that, change your mind and that's okay. Like, we don't have to just dig our heels into something because we said it once. But I also have an open mind. So,
right. We'll get there. Another fun one is that you guys both have your G center defined, which is identity. And so literal, that's, it governs your liver. Figuratively, it is a sense of self, sense of direction, sense of love, like all these things, you are very defined. And so you have a strong sense of who you are. Both of you do.
And what's interesting about that, sorry to interrupt, is I was just thinking about him this morning, and there's another follow-up question I want to ask about the spleen, because you mentioned immunity, is when I met him, the night I met him at a very wonderful dive bar in Queen Anne called Aussie's, which is still alive and kicking to, as far as I know. I can
confirm that it is alive and well.
I knew that I would marry him. Like the day that I met him, like intuitively, I knew, just because of how safe I felt with him the second I met him. And he was also the first man I'd ever met who was completely solid in who he was all the time, which that defined center, the G center confirms, because I had a lot of experiences with frat boys, and they all ended up in sales. They're probably all, I don't know what they are, but they're chameleons. I found a lot of people in the Greek system were very much, and that's great for sales too. And they can really harness other people's energies. And anyway, he was the first person who was like, I said this here, and I'm going to say this at this other place too. Like, my opinion doesn't change based on who I'm talking to or my belief system or whatever. And I'd had so much experience with so many people just being too shapeshifty for me. And so when I met him and my spleen said, this is it, even though he was this baby-faced 22-year-old, and I did not understand like why my body was like, yes, him, that's it. But I also noticed that about him too. And that was like so magnetic for me to meet somebody who just is who he is all the time, no matter what. We have friends who, like they try to pretend they have this hyper masculinity. Like, I can't believe like you bake pies. And he's like, why wouldn't I bake pies? Like, that's not make me any less masculine. Like, you want a pie? Like, I'll give you a pie. And they're like, yeah, I'd like a pie. But like, when they kind of try to get into that toxic masculinity of like, oh, a dude who bakes, but then they're like, yeah, I'll take a pie. He is just never wavers from that. There's no like, I am who I am and I like myself and that I bake pies. And then he offers them a pie and it's a joke and everybody's happy.
I want a pie.
Yeah.
So it totally makes sense. And he is very much defined. Like, I mean, every gate but two in his in his G center are lit. And it's kind of interesting that you brought up the frat boy situation. Well, when you think about it, like the Greek system as a whole, where people are living and they're all intertwined in all of this energy all the time. So you would have people that have the open G center that would be highly influenced by somebody that has a defined one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have a open G center. And so I'm more open to the people around me, I guess. But if I were around somebody that was like, oh, okay, like say he wants to bake, I'd be like, cool, let's bake. Let's try baking. Maybe like baking's the thing. So it makes so much sense when you say like sales and all of a sudden everybody jumps on. Well, part of them are defined and part of them aren't. And so now they're all just kind of one tribe because this is what they're absorbing. It's with being more adaptable to your environment, it's great. But at the same time, it can be really confusing for a lot of people because they'll say like, okay, I am this person based off who they're around. And so when they're alone, they can sometimes feel really confused or like unstable. And so it's just kind of knowing when like, okay, like if it's something that's making you uncomfortable, pull back. If it's not how you want to respond to something and you notice, like if you ever notice that somebody acts a different way depending on who they're around, and you'll be like, ooh, that part's not so great. Like I don't like hanging around them when they're around this person. Well, a lot of times they'll be like, I didn't even realize I was acting that way.
Yeah.
Because they're mirroring somebody that they're in close contact with. And so as long as you notice when it's something you enjoy or versus something you don't enjoy, you can like back up and kind of take like an overhead view. It's a lot more helpful with figuring out who you truly are and not searching constantly. Because also a lot of people that are open in this center will constantly search for who they are or a sense of direction. Like you don't need to search. You just need to kind of let it flow.
Yeah.
And people think that they have to have it all figured out and you don't.
Mm-hmm. Before we get back to the heart ego portion, you mentioned immunity in the lower left-hand side one, the spleen.
Yes.
What specifically about immunity in that center?
So actually people with your spleen, so 55% of people have a defined spleen. And essentially it's tied to like your lymphatic system, which is pretty much covers your entire body. A lot of people that have stronger immune systems have a defined spleen.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about it all the time and I ask because I went back and forth just because I was super freaked out about breastfeeding, just thinking about babies sucking on my boobs. It was very weird for me. And Roz actually had a book about like, dude, you're going to be a dad. And he read that like in that book, I give them my whole immune system through breastfeeding. And I was like, well, shit, I have an amazing immune system. So I have to give that to these children or attempt to, just because I want to set them up for success in their immunity. And it's what just keeps beating me over the head with human design. It's like all these things, like little things that you've said along the way that is like, this is like proof through your chart that this is who you are and how, like, it's a joke for me to say, oh, I have an amazing immune system. Now I have to do the boobs or try to do the boobs because I need to give that to my kids. It's just, it's true. It's proven through this chart. And that's like so validating for me to hear that, like, yes, girl, your immune system's banging. You're not just like saying it.
No, it's science. I'm staring at it. It's great. Like sacrifice the boobs and it was totally worth it for your kids.
Yeah, it was. Okay. That's really helpful too. And we could probably get into how that relates to COVID and things, but that would be a whole 4-hour conversation probably.
It would. And there is definitely a correlation. But yeah, if you notice with this, I can tell a lot of times when I'm at work or at talking to friends who have had kind of like an illness kind of sweep through, right? Like if you're in the corporate world or if your kids are in school, the severity of how hard things hit people and whether they do get sick or not. When you start to pull charts and you start to look, it's the people that typically have a defined spleen typically have less symptoms or less severe. And it's just kind of validating once again, like that this is, it's important. It's not important, but that makes sense. If it's, it's important if you have a defined spleen. And if you don't have a defined spleen, then it means you need to take extra care of yourself and just make sure that what you're absorbing is doing you favors, essentially.
Yeah.
Not that you're doomed if you have an undefined, but it's just something to kind of take note of.
What I'm hearing, and when I send him this episode, is he needs to take the vitamins that I put out for him.
I'll second that. I think that's a great idea. Yeah. Immune support is never a bad thing.
No. Even for me, I take thousands of supplements, it feels like.
Same. So then if we go from there, we go up to the throat center. And the throat center is super cool. It's a manifestation center. Literal, it is your throat, your parathyroid. Figuratively, it's communication and manifestation. If you have this defined, you are meant to express your truth. Yours is not only defined, but it is connected to your emotional center. So, which is what makes you a manifesting generator, is when you have an energy center that's connected directly to your throat. So for you, it's defined, you're meant to express your truth. If you're undefined, you're more of a voice for others. So you kind of, with either way, you want to follow your strategy and authority. So for your husband who's undefined, he would want to wait for the invitation to speak. For you, you're waiting to respond to something. So you're still waiting. You're both waiting, but yours is definitely like, yours is just like right here in the moment, like very straightforward. If anybody's following, you're the third down from the third shape down from the top. It's associated with your thyroid. So if you ever had an issue where you wanted to say something or you haven't been speaking your mind and your throat will start acting up, like something gets caught in your throat, or a lot of times people have like tonsillitis, they'll lose their voices. You will literally, if you're not speaking your mind when you're supposed to, if you are holding a lot of things back, or if you're running your mouth when you really have nothing to say, you will have physical responses in your throat. And a lot of times
to my mom. She's a
really?
manifesting generator too. Yeah, where she lost her voice at certain points when she wasn't speaking up.
It makes sense. Like you can be talking to somebody and they'll be sitting there and they'll literally get frozen. It's like it freezes and they can't say anything. And there are things that you can do to like clear the energy. You can do breath work. You can do chanting. A lot of times singing will just help. You don't even have to be good at it, but singing will literally clear blockages and energy that's stuck in your throat.
I hope that is helpful for people, because I bet a lot of people have had that happen to them and there's no way that they can describe it. Plus they're like, it's so random that they're like, how did this happen and why? And it's all interconnected.
It is. And it's funny how there is the literal and figurative, like of how each center kind of affects your body. So that's why it's kind of important when you take note of like, where am I feeling off and where does this coincide with my chart? Like you can kind of see where you might be out of alignment, basically. And so with your throat, if you have it defined, you have a reliable way of expressing yourself. And if it's open, you don't have a consistent access to this energy. And so it doesn't mean that you don't have a voice. Many great speakers have open throat centers. It doesn't change what's possible for you. It really doesn't. But it's just kind of cool to see when it's defined or when it's not. And I think it's about 28% of the population has this center undefined. So with this center open, a lot of times people can feel this pressure to feel seen or heard. And so they'll just word vomit a lot of times. And you'll just sit there and kind of stare at them like, oh. And it's funny because you can feel it when it doesn't land. Like when people are just talking to fill space, essentially, you're like, oh, okay. Usually that's either you're not using your voice in the right way or you haven't been invited to share.
What about Emilie's? Does she have some?
Oh, that's great.
crazy openings and closings?
I'm pulling up Emilie's right now because I left her chart downstairs. I had it printed out also. I'm that person. I print things out.
I love a printer. Print it out. I have my blueprint that I mentioned from Erin Claire Jones. I have my little Bible completely printed out and in my nightstand so that I can refer to it and understand myself better.
See, I think I like that. People do that. They literally get their blueprints and then I know people have laminated them just as like cheat sheets. Like, oh, I forgot about this. And that's one thing too with human design is like, you can look at it and you can be like, oh, okay, this is great. And then you look at it again and you forget half of what you learned. Mm-hmm. And then it's not a big deal though. You don't have to stress about it. You can go back and you learn new things and nuances all the time, like every time you dive back into it. And Emilie is a emotional generator. And so she's defined like you are straight flush across the bottom. She's got her emotional center, her root, her sacral. So she's a powerhouse. Her sacral is actually also feeding into her spleen. And then her ego's open, her G center's open, her throat is open. Her ajna and her crown are both open. So you kind of fill in some gaps for her as far as like the throat, the identity center, and the willpower. So it's really great that you guys work as a team because she has power and she has energy and she has a lot to bring to the table. And you kind of give her a little bit more in places like the willpower. She can harness your energy there. The G center, it just gives her more of a stability, I guess. And then with the throat, she's just got kind of like a backing, like where when she talks to you, you give her definition in that way. And so it's easier for her to share what she has to say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Let's see, where are we? Ajna. Okay, so we're at another awareness center. This governs literal your mind and pituitary glands. Figuratively, it is your opinions, your judgment, and points of view. So if it's defined, you're here to formulate a point of view. The way you see things is an important part of your purpose. And if it's undefined, you're here to be more open-minded and not cling to your opinions. And I think this is super telling for you, especially because you are when you take in information, you very much see every side of it.
Mm-hmm. And I get annoyed about that too. Sometimes I'm like, ugh. Like, I wish that I didn't see your point of view or that, like, I kind of want to be less empathetic sometimes.
Yes, I get that. So basically if you have it defined, it's, excuse me, it's also like a potential fear gate because it is an awareness center, just like your spleen would be. But if it's defined, you're here to form opinions, your own unique point of view, and you tend to be very, very consistent with this. So you're meant to have a point of view. You're meant to share it because people need to hear that. Whether you're on the left side, the right side, the top, the bottom, doesn't really matter. You're meant to speak your mind and say what you're thinking, especially if it's connected to your throat. And then if it's open, you're meant to more, you don't have consistent access. And so you're keeping an open mind, and it's not healthy for you to waste time and energy to form really, really strong opinions or try to convince people that you're right. Mm-hmm. That's the bigger thing, is you're just kind of taking things in like, okay, you can weigh things without having a strong conviction either way. And you can provide people with more options.
Trying to look at my kids because I'm convinced my son has a closed one. And no, his is open, but my daughter's is closed, which is interesting because he's a manifester. I just figured based on how stubborn he is and kind of like set in his ways that he would have a closed one and she would have an open one. But it's the opposite.
Yeah. So manifestors also have a very, very powerful presence. Like mm-hmm. people have stated that they raise themselves in a way. Like he's just like, okay, like this is me. I'm the parent. And so especially if he gets frustrated or angry, it's because he's like, okay, you're a few steps behind me. I've already done this. I don't know if you know this. I'm not 4, I'm 40. So for him, he's just like,
that is definitely my life experience with him.
most manifestors find out that they butt heads with their parents, and it's because they feel like they've already kind of cleared XYZ. They're very much raising themselves, but they're just so powerful. Like their aura is so powerful. And so it makes sense that him being strong in that sense would come across that he has like a defined ajna or mind in general. And the cool thing for this one, it's great capacity for like wisdom. And if you keep it open, like you're a constant learner, like a consistent learner. And so I think we talked about this the other day, where it's so cool to be around people that have differing opinions. And it's awesome to be able to take everything in and see all sides of it. And that's exactly, I mean, you have an open ajna, so that totally makes sense that that's something that makes you happy.
Yeah.
So then once again,
it's going to be interesting for her then, like a little fast moving person who has very strong opinions that are going to be hard to change. Like she's not going to be as minded.
What she has, like the opinions that she has though, are going to help other people decipher their own, right? Because other people are going to take her strong opinions and they're going to either agree with them or they're not. And so she's going to be kind of a signpost for people to kind of develop what their thought process is. They're very much going to agree or not. Or for you, you're taking everything in, and that's how you're going to make your decisions. You're going to take in all sides, and hers is going to be one of them, and it's going to be super important.
Yeah.
As your kids get older. Yeah.
I just keep thinking she's going to join a religious cult, and then she's going to try to convince me that's like what I'm thinking.
She might start the religious cult.
Oh, geez. She would. She has the energy for it too.
Fast forward 20 years. No, I'm just kidding. So with the Crown Center, which we're all the way at the top, now we're up. Oh, one thing also for people that have the defined, we won't get into too many channels, but with the defined ajna and throat, there is a channel it's the 4323, and it's known as the freak to genius, which I'm not sure if that's going to PC last for the next 20 years or not, but
I love that.
Basically, there are thoughts that happen and you're meant to share them, but you're meant to share them with people that you know they're going to land with. So you can have a completely outlandish thought and you can speak it to the wrong person or a person who's not open to hearing it. And it is literal crickets. It's like it bounces back, smacks you in the face. A lot of people get embarrassed. They're like, oh, why did I say that? But so they're just basically, people will deem you like, oh, that's a freak. Like they don't know what they're talking about, or this is a crazy thought. And then when it comes to somebody that's open to hearing it and you say the same thing, they're like, okay, this person could possibly be a genius because they understand.
I would bet my grandfather has that because he's been on like the forefront of so many things that people don't really care to study. He's a recently retired. He's going to be 93 next month, but he was a periodontist for like over 50 years, and he's done a lot of research on sugar and TMJ, not related to each other, but especially his work on sugar. It was like 20 years ago that he was talking about how awful sugar is and tried to make me write a book with him. And I was like, Papa, I can't do that because that would be a nightmare, but you're not wrong. And he writes these papers and sends them in to professors. He got his dentistry degree, multiple degrees at UW, and he'll send them in and people just dismiss him. And he'll like work to get a meeting with them. And then he is the definition of somebody who has to find the right person. And at this point, it's not a crazy idea, but it was and has been to be, and also a dangerous one, with how much money people make off of sugary products, for him to say sugar is like addictive, it will kill you, it's awful, blah, 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 blah. That's not something that lands with a lot of people now more, but like, I mean, how many more years does he have to get his research in front of the right people?
Right. And that's exactly it. Is it like if people aren't willing to, if they're not open to hearing it, and the way that, like, I have a friend who also has it. As soon as there's certain things that he says to me that like, all like, oh, okay, yeah, Chad, you're right. Like, we'll be on the golf course and he'll say something. And I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. And then I look over and anybody else that's within earshot is looking at us like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, what? And then I pull charts and I'm like, okay, yeah, Chad and I, like, we both got this freak to genius situation. So he's one person that I always know I can just spit out whatever I have to say and it lands every time. And it's because we share this channel. It's great.
So
but
cool.
it's so random also though. Some of the things that I have pop into my head, I'm just like, I really want to share this with somebody, but I know it's not right. I know it's not right. And then I've kind of tested my theory now that I know, and I'll just spit it out, fully knowing it's going to come back and hit me in the face just to see what happens. And it does every time. Like,
except with him.
Except with Chad. Yeah. Thanks, Chad.
I bet you need to come over and pull Papa's chart and then talk to him about sugar. You two would have a lot of fun.
Yes, we would. We have the same ideas about sugar also. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
He's probably part of the reason that I feel the way I do. His research got us somewhere for sure. So we are going to, let's see. Oh, wait. So we just hit the crown. Oh, no, we didn't. I started it and then I got distracted.
Yeah, because I keep interrupting.
No, that's me. I'm kind of squirreling. So the crown center. So this is also a pressure center, just like the root. So if you have, it is not it doesn't have an energy to it though. And so it's literal, it's the pineal gland, it's figurative, inspiration. Defined is self-inspired. Undefined is externally inspired and susceptible to mental pressure. So both you and your husband actually have these top two open, which means that a lot of times if you guys are in, say your mind's spinning, right? And you're both spinning about the same thing. Sometimes it's really important to back up and go, okay, did we pick this up? Is it yours? Is it mine? Is it either of ours? Did somebody leave the house and pick it up at Trader Joe's? Like, you don't know until you actually kind of back up and look at it. So if it's defined, it's your center for like the everyday mundane thoughts and also for inspiration, right? And it's considered one of the pressure centers because we're always under pressure here to have the answers. So you will be susceptible to other people kind of like their pressure that they're feeling. Because you typically on your own, you shouldn't have a ton of it. If you're undefined, it's one of the easier centers to have undefined because it's at the very top of your chart. It's only got 3 channels that are possibly attached to it or 3 gates. So it makes it, what is it? Undefined is about 70% of the population, which is freaking huge. And so if you're defined, you are a force when it comes to inspiration. You're always radiating energetic inspiration out around you. And if you have it undefined, you're picking up from those people. And it can be anywhere. Like literally, if you're walking through, like I mentioned, TJ's, you're walking through Trader Joe's and all of a sudden it's like, boom, you get this thought like randomly popping into your head. Look around you. Like just look around if you have an open center because it popped in from someone else. And now you get to figure out what to do with it. Maybe it's for inspiration for you. That's another great reason to use like a co-working space, right? Yeah. Is you go in and like you can get ideas from outside sources and then you can run with them.
What's funny about that is I have, we've mentioned before, and Emilie and I both have her. Calliope, the Powerhouse Princess, is our intuitive business coach. And she did a little spread for me where she said, you're going to have a new idea and it's going to hit you randomly in like the next month if you give yourself time to be kind of disconnect from just being heads down in the work. Like if you give yourself that space, it's going to hit you. So I imagine it'll probably be from an outside source because I'm very inspired by like outside sources. I need to go on a walk or go tool around a store or a museum or something. And that's where I find inspiration or reading. But definitely like I'd never thought about it would pop in my head from an outside source because I'm open.
Yeah. And so everybody's aura is like, if you imagine that your aura is like 3 feet around you, right? You're constantly taking in other people's energy just in passing at a bus stop. You're sitting on public transportation. That's why it's so important to be kind of very discerning with where you put yourself, because you are what you absorb, right? And so you're taking on everybody's energy. So if you ever feel overwhelmed or, like you need to disconnect, a lot of people can't just, take a nap every 2 seconds, but like just go into your own space in a way to kind of disconnect and see, just kind of, it's just, especially anywhere that you're open, is just a place that you can really, really get curious on what these certain things mean to you, where they came from, if it is yours, if it isn't yours. It can be really helpful with emotions or mind space. Like if you really need to clear out your energy, go take a shower. Like, have you ever noticed when you're in a shower and that's like when you get these like brainiac ideas or like these things pop in out of nowhere?
Mm-hmm.
It's because everything else is kind of drifting away and you're in your own self.
Mm-hmm. I learned too from, like, I think I mentioned this before too, that like I would be kind of embarrassed before to be like, get this energy off of me. And like, I'm doing hand motions right now. Like I even taught my kids of like, when they're all being psychotic and overwhelming me, I like do this. I'm like, get your energy off of me. I don't need that anymore. And I'll like do little things, or I'll have my Palo Santo stick and I'm like, cleanse, cleanse, cleanse. Like, I don't need to carry this any longer. It's not mine. And I kind of hope that my kids adopt it, of like, when they're carrying too much from all the outside sources, that they can do those motions or whatever works for them. I knew, I think Danica even mentioned her mom, who was a nurse, would get in the car and cut the cords of energy with her fingers, like as scissors, to be like, I'm done with this. I'm not taking this home from my day and bringing it back into the rest of my world, and literally cut the cords with her fingers. And I thought that was so cool. I never even thought or considered to do those things. The shower is amazing for me too. And if I can't, then just walking around, pushing it away, cutting it, whatever works for you, I think is just so helpful.
It is. And Danica's mom's a fucking pioneer. And for you, with like the waving your arms and everything, it really like it does have an effect. And when you get to clear out everybody's space or everybody else, right? And then that's how you kind of get more in tune with who you are. And that's why it's a big deal to disconnect. And, Erin Claire Jones will talk about how a lot of people are told to not sleep in the same bed because it's not conducive to it's when you're in somebody else's energy all the time. It's a lot. It can light up different channels for you. It can, it can be exhausting for some people to be constantly turned on because somebody else is defined. And so she talks about sleeping in separate rooms from her partner. It's not feasible for a lot of people. A lot of people don't want to do it. A lot of people feel disconnected, funny enough, that's actually true. Yeah, you feel disconnected because you are. And also, rent prices, a lot of people can't always afford to have just an extra bedroom lying around for somebody else to sleep in. But when you notice that you have a lot of heaviness, or when you notice you have a lot of things going on with you that, there's a good chance that if you look at your chart, they're not yours. And you can kind of dictate where they go and where those energies are coming from based on where you're open or closed.
Yeah. This is so amazing. It's like the next level. I feel like this is Human Design 202. We did 101 last time. Next time we need to do 303, maybe with the lines. There's so many lines.
Yeah, gates and channels. Yeah. No, we definitely dive into that. That gets super exciting. And also with like how your energy centers connect to each other changes things. Like depending which energy center is connected to your throat can change a lot. Depending which energy centers or what you have connected to your spleen or connected to your sacral, or where are you more defined than you aren't, it can tell you where your fears tend to come from. Each gate has a different, each gate has an intricacy, I guess is a good word, that changes every little aspect of your chart. Yeah. So whether you deep dive in, you can focus on one gate if you want to. You're better off staring at the big picture, but it's really nice when you can kind of hone in and see like little tiny guys, and then you can pick.
Yeah. And this is such a digestible way for me, because I know like last year when I was getting into this, or I guess it was 2020, where is time going? I I got it and I immediately was like, I need to throw this in the recycling because I don't understand it at all. It's like too overwhelming, but you just have to start somewhere. And that's why I love the summaries that you can get and why I bought my blueprint. But now that there are more experts out there and people are getting more interested, that's why your first episode was so popular. And we asked you back before we even knew that it would be that popular because it's such an important thing for everybody to know. But the cool thing about it is, for people who are just kind of wanting this served to them more on a platter, these conversations are just really powerful because it helps them just get started somewhere, and then they can feel empowered to dig in a little bit more and figure themselves out and what they want to do for a next step. And obviously I'm biased at this point, but I even bought for my virtual assistant a session with you so that she's young and just getting started and she's so amazing. And for her to be able to tap in to what's going to help her as a human just operate in the world, but also like now that she is working more from home, since she's a projector too, you recommended for her to go to a coffee shop and just absorb people's energy so that she can be more productive. And she had indicated to you like how helpful that is. So anybody just having a session with you where they can get this like overview of like, well, have you thought about this? And has this worked for you before? Just based on, your time of birth and location, it could really change everything for people. And that's why I think it's so powerful.
I agree with you. It's super powerful. And the main thing with it is that it gives everybody, it's constantly like validating, and
Mm-hmm.
it gives everybody permission to act in a way that comes most naturally to them. Because a lot of times we say, oh, well, that's so easy. Like the things that come to you easiest, the things that are just naturally coming to you, those are your gifts. But because we see it in ourselves, we're just like, oh, well, that's just something I do. That's just, it's so easy. And we just gloss over them. And then we try to be this like something that we're not necessarily, trying to, do what the world is telling us to do. And once you break it down and you realize like, okay, I don't have to get up 6 a.m. and do a workout every day. That doesn't work for me. I don't have to, I need X amount of hours of sleep, not how many Joe Schmo across the street needs. There's different permissions you can give yourself to be who you truly are and let your body operate in the way that's optimal.
Yeah. For you. Like we were talking about the other day, I've been telling everybody because it's my new favorite term, bioindividuality, which plays into this to an extent as well. It's like this gives you permission to be you, just like you said, and operate in a way that makes sense. Like maybe intermittent fasting is the right thing for you. Maybe it's not. And just having that sense about yourself rather than like, oh, the world is saying I need to do it this way. You can try it that way. Maybe it does work for you, but there are other ways of being, and tapping into that inner knowing is, I think, the best part of human design for me. So I'm really excited for more people to hear this and hopefully be booking you. I heard a few people were trying to get on your website and get some time with you.
I'm super excited that it's getting more traction. Bioindividuality is the coolest concept, yet so simple. Like, who would have thought that each one of us is an individual, right? Like, so everybody's system is so different. And I just love that it's gaining traction because it's giving people more permission to be who they are and be accepting of that and healthier in their own way and not trying to fit into this little box. And a lot of people are literally killing themselves on, how much time they're spending, how much energy they're expending trying to fit into that box. And in reality, life's supposed to be enjoyable. Mm-hmm. So once you figure out your personal flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's amazing. Everybody book Sam. Give us your website again.
My website is www.humanaligned.com. And I'm at Human Aligned on Instagram.
And you're going to post
on
your feed more?
Yes, on my feed.
I wonder, like, what is the projector in you? Is it like that's keeping you from posting, like, not that you have to post a certain amount, but like are projectors like perfectionists more than other people, where it's like it has to look a certain way, or you just want to like, or have the energy to do it? This is me as like a retiring social media manager who just can't help myself.
Yeah. So we get into systems and patterns a lot. And I personally, I have an issue with questioning myself sometimes. And so I'll be like, oh, okay, like I'm going to post. And then if I don't have a deadline for said post, I have a defined route. If I don't have a deadline, I was actually talking to a checker at Trader Joe's about this, because he was talking, he was talking about how everybody was giving him shit. And I like looked at him and he said, yeah, I don't have this paper done yet. And he said, it's due on Friday. And this was like Tuesday. And I said, okay. And he's like, I'm procrastinating and everybody's giving me shit. They're like, oh, you only have X amount of time left. And I said, do you normally wait till the last minute? He said, yeah. And I said, is that when you best perform? He's like, yeah. I'm like, and you get it done, right? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, so why don't you just think of it as you're not procrastinating, but like you do well with deadlines. And like, once you have that deadline, you're going to make it happen. As long as it's not burning you out, why don't you just accept that that's how you work best?
Yep.
And I'm assuming he has a defined route, but that's for me also, is that I'll say, if I don't put a date on something, I don't do it.
Same.
So my entire calendar is very, very, very overwhelming to people, because I have something like noted every day, every hour, essentially, like I'm doing this. If it's whatever it is, it's going in the calendar, because then I know I'm going to do it.
Yep. I'm the same. I have, I'll give myself arbitrary deadlines. I even give them to my clients as like, this is the deadline I'm giving myself. Does that work for you? Because I can't not have a deadline. I just have to have it organized. And I tell them up front, this is like, I need an arbitrary deadline. So just humor me on this. Like, cause I'm my own boss now, so I have to just pretend that I have this time stamp on it. But no, I'm not hating on you for not posting. I'm just like, different people have different blocks around it. And for me, if I don't have a story to tell, or I don't have the energy to write the caption I want to write, then I'm either like, I have to be like, I'm cool with this just being a barely there caption. Like that has its place too. But most of the time, because it's who I am, I want to tell the story. And if I don't have the energy to tell the story, then I just don't. Like, I don't care about consistency. I care about putting out the words that I want to put out. And that requires a lot of my energy, which I often have to expend on clients, kids, husband, etc.
No, it totally makes sense. Yeah.
Everybody has their process. So they'll find you wherever they want to find you, your website, your social media. You do post a lot to your stories now, which I appreciate. And they're super beautiful zoomed in shots, which I love. And I think the meetings that you have with the videos for people, that's super cool. That's my favorite offering that you have, because it's just like here, like we were talking about with the coffee earlier, and I'm not going to give you the rapid fires because we already did them, is just put it straight in my veins.
Yes.
And I think that's probably the easiest like entry point for people with human design, especially because like if you just get your chart, you're like, okay, I don't get it, I'm done here.
Right. If you look at it, it's going to be Greek, alien, whatever way you want to go about it. When you look at it, you're going to be like, oh, and a lot of people push back, and it's something that if they don't understand it right away, then they get discouraged. But if you just sit with it for a minute with somebody that knows, and it doesn't have to be me, find somebody that you love their verbiage and how they communicate, and talk to them about your chart. If they know anything about human design, it's going to be helpful.
What's your favorite resource for pulling their free chart?
I personally use Genetic Matrix. You can pull a free chart on it. I do a paid subscription because then I can have unlimited charts. So I will ask somebody at a hockey game, like, what's your time of birth? And I will end up pulling their chart during like, what else are you going to do during the break periods? Right. Mm-hmm. Like, so the mini kids are out there playing hockey, and I'm pulling charts and talking to people from other states that want to learn more about human design because I can't keep my mouth shut. So it's like, I have so many charts, but I appreciate, Genetic Matrix for me is my favorite. And it's got different options on it. Like there's some education on there, but you can pull your entire family's charts. You can keep them on hand. So that's my favorite way to do it. And you can save them as PDFs if you want to print them out. like I did here.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
yes.
Thank you so much, Sam. I'm sure we'll get a ton of feedback of wanting a part 3. So we'll probably be in touch with you about that. And thank you everyone for listening to this episode of The Coast. We will be back with another super banging, awesome entrepreneur next week. Thank you. This episode's music was provided by Sloan Best.
And editing provided by Kayla Shu.